In March of 2021, a 90-minute documentary called Seaspiracy landed on Netflix and immediately took over the global streaming conversation. The film delivered a highly polished, devastating message to its audience. The entire concept of sustainable fishing is a corporate lie. According to the filmmakers, there is no ethical way to pull seafoods from the ocean, leaving a vegan diet as the only moral choice. The reaction was explosive. Viewers directed massive public backlash toward the commercial seafood industry and flooded the social media accounts of major ocean conservation charities, accusing them of actively covering up the destruction of the sea. For millions of well-intentioned viewers, a foundational belief in environmental regulation shattered overnight. People who actively tried to make ethical choices at the grocery store were suddenly left entirely unsure of how to actually protect the ocean. That viral outrage tapped into a very real underlying anxiety. Survey data consistently shows that the vast majority of consumers are deeply worried about the health of ocean ecosystems and actively want to avoid contributing to the problem. Historically, those consumers have relied on independent certification bodies to guide their spending. They look for specific visual cues, like the blue checkmark of the Marine Stewardship Council, to guarantee their dinner was harvested responsibly. But an aggressive activist counter-narrative, championed by groups like PETA and the Seaspiracy filmmakers, argue that these exact labels are greenwashing schemes. They claim certifiers operate a pay-to-play model, collecting massive licensing fees to rubber stamp the very corporations envying the seas. We are left with a severe contradiction. If prominent activists and established marine scientists violently disagree on whether eco-labels are legitimate, how do we define what saving the ocean actually means? To understand the activists' anger, we have to look at the historical root of fisheries management. In the late 1940s, a colonial logging concept was adapted for the ocean. It was called Maximum Sustainable Yield, or MSY, a mathematical benchmark designed to calculate the highest possible catch a fleet could take over time. This animated diagram shows how the MSY model works. Under this framework, sustainability is defined as cutting a fish population exactly in half, triggering maximum biological regrowth, which conveniently aligns with maximum profitability for the fleet. But critics point out a massive flaw. MSY treats fish as isolated inventory. By evaluating a single species in a vacuum, the model willfully ignores what happens to the broader environment when half the animals are removed. When half the animals are removed, predators starve, fragile reef dynamics warp, and the ocean's biological carbon pump begins to break down. When industrial extraction is the primary goal, physical destruction follows. Commercial fleets utilizing this volume-first mindset drag immense trawl nets across fragile seafloors and discard thousands of tons of synthetic fishing gear into the water, creating lethal plastic pollution. The relentless drive for cheap, high-volume seafood also breeds extreme human exploitation. Investigative reports have documented forced labor, human trafficking, and severe abuse aboard poorly regulated international fleets, operating far beyond the reach of normal labor laws. Looking at this isolated, extraction-heavy model, you can see exactly why critics are so furious. To them, the word sustainable is a bureaucratic mask hiding an inherently destructive global machine. Yet, the marine biologists, policy experts, and institutional certifiers working inside this system pushed back hard against the documentary, arguing that Seaspiracy relied heavily on debunked misinformation to make its case. Their first target was the film's most terrifying viral statistic, the absolute assertion that the oceans will be entirely empty of fish by the year 2048. That specific 2048 claim relies entirely on a single scientific paper published back in 2006. The original author of that study, Boris Worm, formally retracted that apocalyptic projection years ago, publishing a follow-up report clarifying that the empty oceans claim was factually incorrect. Scientists also deconstructed the film's second major myth. The documentary stated a staggering 40. It is a serious management issue, but the scale was wildly exaggerated for the camera. Furthermore, researchers possess hard data showing that rigorous management actually works. Take the Patagonian toothfish, a deep-water species often marketed as Chilean sea bass. After suffering severe depletion, strict international catch limits and monitoring protocols were enforced, allowing the species to successfully rebound. To the scientific consensus, sustainable fishing is a mathematically rigorous reality. The tragedy is that this tedious, data-driven progress is constantly undermined by sensationalized viral misinformation. Let's step away from the academic debate and look at the actual economic reality out on the water. For the fishermen and distribution businesses trying to operate ethically, sustainability is brutally expensive. They pay for extensive initial assessments, submit to continuous third-party audits, and provide total supply chain transparency. They also make deliberate operational sacrifices. Ethical fleets actively avoid highly profitable marine protected areas, leaving dense populations of valuable fish in the water so those ecosystems have the necessary space to recover. They also have to purchase costly equipment upgrades. Crews install specialized net modifications and exclusion devices designed specifically to allow endangered species and unwanted bycatch to escape unharmed before the catch is hauled aboard. Every sustainable metric achieved on these boats represents a deliberate, high-cost operational decision that pulls money away from the bottom line. This creates a dangerous paradox. When consumers absorb the absolute all seafood is evil messaging pushed by viral documentaries, the immediate market impact is a drop in targeted demand. Shoppers standing at the grocery counter become overwhelmed by the conflicting information. Frustrated, they refuse to pay the higher premium required to stock certified sustainable seafood. The unintended economic consequence of this behavior is severe. Widespread boycotts financially punish the highly regulated fleets, spending heavily to invest in ethical practices, while leaving the worst, unregulated, black market offenders entirely untouched. If consumers remove the financial reward for good behavior, the industry defaults to a race to the bottom. Without a financial incentive to protect the environment, operators are pushed to adopt the cheapest, most destructive fishing methods available just to survive. Real sustainability depends on a constant, heavily regulated management system. The survival of the world's fisheries relies on our willingness to fund that work through the choices we make at the grocery counter.